Roger's hand froze midair, hovering over Linda's shoulder like he'd touched something hot. "Don't touch me in front of my boss, Roger." Her voice carried just far enough. "It's embarrassing." The Christmas party chatter kept going, but 3 people heard it clear. The bartender looked away real quick. Mrs. Chen, whose deck Roger had built 2 years back, met his eyes with something like pity before turning toward the punch bowl. Gerald Pemberton, Linda's boss, raised his whiskey glass and smirked. Roger stood there with his hand still raised, feeling the wool of his good shirt scratch against his neck. The punch smelled like cinnamon and disappointment. Tinny Christmas music played from corner speakers. Linda's expensive perfume, something new he didn't recognize, cut through the warm room like a blade. His hand dropped to his side. The shame burned hotter than the punch. And the worst part? This wasn't the first time she'd dismissed him like a stray dog. It was just the first time witnesses heard it aloud. That morning, Roger had finished the crown molding in the living room, ran his calloused hand along the joint where 2 pieces met, feeling for imperfections his eyes couldn't catch. Perfect. 40 years of carpentry, and that satisfaction never got old, when wood fit together like it was meant to. He'd put on his good shirt for the party. The blue one, Linda used to say, brought out his eyes. Back when she noticed things like that. She was already at the community hall when he arrived. Had driven separately, something about needing to help set up. Roger spotted her across the room, laughing with Gerald Pemberton. Her boss stood close, too close for just talking about work. She wore a black dress Roger had never seen before. Expensive looking. He grabbed 2 cups of punch and headed over. "Hey." Roger held out a cup. Linda took it without looking at him. "Thanks." And she turned back to Gerald mid-sentence, like Roger was a waiter who'd done his job. Roger stood there, cup in his own hand, trying to find a way into the conversation. Gerald was going on about some development project, Riverside something, using words like leverage and strategic positioning. Linda nodded along, engaged in a way Roger couldn't remember her being with him in months. "I was thinking we could," Roger started. Linda shifted her body, angling away from him. Not dramatic. Just enough that he was standing outside the circle now instead of in it. He tried 2 more times over the next hour. Each time, Linda found a reason to move. A coworker, to greet, the bathroom, more per punch. Gerald stayed by her side most of the night, proprietary hand on her elbow when they walked, leaning in close to whisper things that made her laugh. Roger ended up by the Christmas tree, looking at lights he'd probably wired in half the houses represented here. Built decks, fixed roofs, installed kitchen cabinets, knew most of these people. But standing alone in a crowded room, he felt invisible. The humiliation came at 8:30. He decided to try one more time, just act like a normal husband. Linda was talking to Gerald and his assistant by the bar. Roger walked up, smiled, reached out to touch Linda's shoulder. Just a greeting. The kind of touch married people do without thinking. She jerked away like he'd burned her. "Don't touch me in front of my boss, Roger. It's embarrassing." The words hung in the air. The bartender's hand paused mid-pour. Mrs. Chen stood 3 feet away, holding a cookie, her face going soft with sympathy. Gerald's assistant looked down at her shoes, uncomfortable. Gerald smirked into his whiskey glass. "Easy there, big guy. Lady needs her space." Roger's face went hot. His hand was still raised, fingers curled around nothing. He lowered it slowly, carefully, like he was diffusing something explosive. "I was just saying hello," he said quietly. "Well, don't." Linda turned back to Gerald without another glance. Roger walked to the coat rack, put on his jacket with hands that wanted to shake, but wouldn't let them. Not here, not in front of everyone. Nobody stopped him. The drive home, snow started coming down harder. Big flakes that stuck to the windshield faster than the wipers could clear them. Linda had followed him out 10 minutes later, got in the passenger seat without a word. They drove in silence. Linda's phone glowed in her lap. She was texting someone, smiling at the screen. 5 miles from home. She laughed. Actually laughed out loud at something on her phone. Then she must have felt him looking because she glanced over. "You're too sensitive," she said, voice light. It was just work talk. Gerald's particular about professional boundaries. She reached over and touched Roger's arm. Her fingers were warm through his sleeve. First time she'd touched him voluntarily in, he couldn't remember how long. "You know I didn't mean anything by it, right?" Roger wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. "Yeah, I know." "Good." She pulled her hand back, went back to her phone. They pulled into the driveway. The house Roger had built with his own hands, board by board, sat dark under the falling snow. He'd designed the porch, cut every piece of trim, laid the floor in the kitchen. Linda was out of the car before he cut the engine. By the time Roger got inside, stomping snow off his boots, her guest room door was already closed. Phone light glowing underneath, thin and cold as a knife blade. Roger stood in the kitchen, the one he'd built 35 years ago, cabinets he'd sanded by hand, and made himself a cup of coffee in the mug his father had helped him make in shop class. The table was solid oak, joints fitted so precise they'd never loosened. He sat down and stared at the guest room door. Linda had been sleeping there 7 months now. Said his snoring kept her up. He'd believed that too. Wanted to believe it. The coffee cooled in his hands. Outside, the radio in his truck crackled a blizzard warning. 18 to 24 inches expected. Roads closing by morning. Roger looked around the kitchen. Every surface was something he'd built. Every corner held a memory of the effort it took. The blister on his thumb that wouldn't heal while he laid the floor. The August heat during the roof work. The winter he insulated, working by trouble light in the crawl space. He ran his fingers over the oak table. Perfect joints, measured twice, cut once, built to last. How many times had he forgiven what he should have questioned? The guest room door stayed closed. Her phone buzzed, muffled. Linda's laugh came through the wall, warm and genuine, the sound she never made for him anymore. Snow kept falling outside. The blizzard was coming, and Roger Hensley sat alone at the table he'd built, realizing he was already in the middle of one. Roger woke up on the couch with his neck stiff and the house cold. He'd fallen asleep there around 3. Gave up trying to get comfortable. The living room window showed nothing but white. Snow had drifted halfway up the glass. He made coffee. The machine gurgled and hissed, filling the kitchen with a smell that used to mean morning and possibility. Now it just meant another day. Linda came out of the guest room around 8, wearing a robe he didn't recognize. Silk, probably expensive. She poured herself coffee in a travel mug and went straight back to her room without a word. Roger's phone rang. First job cancellation, then the second, then the third. Snow too heavy, roads closed. Nobody was going anywhere today. He heard Linda on a call in her room. "Oh, that's too bad," she said, but her voice had relief in it. "Well, at least you'll be home. You can finally relax." She hung up. Roger heard her laugh, quiet to herself, like she'd gotten good news instead of bad. They moved through the house like ghosts. Roger made eggs at 10. Linda came down at 10:30, made her own. They sat at opposite ends of the kitchen table, the wood grain between them wide as a canyon. "Storm's supposed to last 2 days," Roger said. Linda looked at her phone. "Might lose power." That would be inconvenient." Still looking at her phone, she was smiling at something. Roger rinsed his plate. Behind him, Linda's phone buzzed. She stood up fast, nearly knocked her chair over. "I've got a Zoom call," she said, already heading for the stairs. "It's Saturday. Gerald needs to go over some projections." She said it like it was obvious. Like Gerald, calling on a Saturday during a blizzard was the most natural thing in the world. Roger heard her door close, lock click. 10 minutes later, her voice came through the floor, warm and animated, laughing at something Gerald said. She'd showered, put on makeup for a video call during a blizzard. He sat back down at the table and stared at the snow erasing the world outside. By afternoon, Roger's head was pounding, stress headaches settling behind his eyes like a vice. He needed aspirin. Checked the bathroom cabinet. Empty. Kitchen drawer. Nothing. Linda's briefcase sat on the counter. She always kept aspirin in there. Didn't like being without it. He could hear her upstairs, still on the call. Gerald's voice a low rumble. Linda's laugh, bright and false. Roger opened the briefcase. Aspirin bottle right on top. He grabbed it. That's when he saw the papers underneath. Loan documents. Pemberton Riverside Development Project. Amount $340,000. Secured against property at 1247 Oak Ridge Road. His address. The house he'd built. Roger pulled the papers out with shaking hands. His contractor's license number was listed as collateral guarantee. Date 3 months ago. His signature at the bottom, except it wasn't his signature. Close, but not quite right. The loop on the R too round, the tail on the Y too short. Linda had practiced it, though. Practiced it enough to fool someone who wasn't looking close. Roger set the aspirin bottle down. Kept reading, terms of the loan, development plans for a riverside property that didn't exist. He knew every development project in the county came with the job. This one was smoke. He found another document, bank warning letter, crumpled like someone had balled it up and then smoothed it out. Irregularities noted in loan authorization. Please contact our office to confirm signature. Dated 2 weeks ago. The papers rattled in his hands, not shaking now, trembling. His coffee from this morning sat cold on the counter. He could smell it, bitter and old. Upstairs, Linda's laugh rang out clear and bright. $340,000 against the house he had spent 40 years building. A signature that wasn't his on a project that didn't exist. And she'd done it without saying a word. The headache was gone, replaced by something colder. Roger heard her footsteps on the stairs. She was humming. Linda stopped in the kitchen doorway when she saw him standing there with the papers. "You went through my briefcase?" Not shocked, not guilty. Annoyed, like he'd violated her privacy. Roger held up the loan documents. "You forged my signature. Gerald said you'd never notice." She walked past him, poured more coffee. calm as Sunday morning. $340,000, Linda. You put our house up as collateral. It's a business opportunity. She leaned against the counter, sipping. The returns are significant. I built this house. Roger's voice stayed level, but his hands were crushing the papers. Every board, every nail. You sold it without asking me. Oh, Roger. She set her cup down with a sigh. You don't understand business. Gerald has an MBA. He knows what he's doing. What he's doing is fraud. This development doesn't exist. I know every project in this county. Because you barely finished high school. Linda's voice went sharp. You hammer nails for a living. Gerald creates wealth. There's a difference. The words hit harder than the forgery. Barely finished high school. Like 40 years of skilled work meant nothing. Like building half this town's houses was something to be embarrassed about. Roger stared at his wife. She stared back, no apology in her eyes, no shame, just irritation that he'd found out. Her phone rang. Gerald's name on the screen. We're not done talking, Roger said. Linda answered anyway. Hey. Yeah, I'm free now. She walked toward the guest room. No, it's fine. Just Roger being Roger. The door closed. Lock clicked. Roger stood alone in the kitchen with the forged papers in his hands. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, through the locked door, Linda laughed with Gerald like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just stolen 40 years of Roger's life with a pen stroke. His hands weren't shaking anymore. They'd gone completely numb, and that scared him more than anything else. Day 3 of the blizzard, Roger hadn't slept. Sat at the kitchen table since 4 in the morning, watching the sky turn from black to gray. Snow had stopped falling, but the world outside looked buried, dead. Linda came downstairs at 7:30, cheerful as a bird. She hummed while she made breakfast. Eggs and toast, just for herself. Set her plate on the counter and ate standing up, scrolling through her phone. Smiling at something. Roger watched her move through the kitchen he'd built. She stepped around him like he was furniture. Didn't acknowledge the papers still sitting on the table between them. The forged signature. The stolen equity? Yesterday's confrontation might as well have never happened. Storm should clear by tonight, Linda said, pouring coffee into her travel mug. You'll be able to get back to work tomorrow. Like that was the problem. Like work was what he'd been worried about. We need to talk about, Roger started. I've got another call with Gerald. She was already heading for the stairs, coffee in hand. Important stuff, you understand. She disappeared into the guest room. Lock clicked. 2 minutes later, her laugh drifted down. Warm and easy, the laugh Roger used to know. He sat at the table and didn't move. The thermostat war had been going on for months. Linda kept lowering it. Roger kept raising it back. Neither of them ever said a word about it. Today, she came down at noon and turned it to 62. Roger waited until she went back upstairs, turned it to 68. She came down an hour later, 62 again. He raised it. She lowered it. A whole marriage, reduced to a battle over temperature. Roger walked through the house in the afternoon while Linda was locked in her room. Ran his hands along the crown molding in the living room, the piece he'd finished the morning of the party. Perfect joints. He remembered the precision it took, the patience. In the dining room, he touched the built-in cabinets. Remembered the summer he'd installed them, how Linda had brought him lemonade and told him he had magic hands. The archway between the kitchen and hall, he'd designed that himself. Had to special order the wood. Linda had loved it, said it made the house feel like a home. Now she walked under it without looking up. Roger stood in the middle of his house and tried to remember when things had changed. When had she stopped bringing him lemonade? When had she started sleeping in the guest room? When had his touch become something embarrassing? He couldn't pinpoint it. That was the worst part. It hadn't been one moment. It had been 1,000 small deaths, so quiet he'd missed them until they'd buried him. The memories came like uninvited guests that night. Their wedding, small church, maybe 40 people. Linda, in a simple white dress, laughing when he fumbled the ring. I'll build you a house, he'd promised. Best one you've ever seen? Her eyes had been bright with belief. First year in this house. They'd danced in the empty living room, no furniture yet, just plywood subfloor and promise. Linda had trusted his vision, trusted him. 10 years ago, planting the cherry tree out front for their anniversary, Linda had helped dig dirt under her fingernails, calling him my builder with real affection. 5 years ago, Roger, honey, I need to sleep in the guest room. Your snoring is so bad. And he'd believed her, wanted to. 3 years ago, Linda's promotion to Gerald's executive assistant. New clothes, new perfume, new coldness starting, so gradual he'd told himself it was just work stress. Last Thanksgiving, Linda at the table with her phone instead of the food. Roger had tried to include her in conversation with the neighbors. She'd rolled her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. But he had been. He'd seen it and pretended he hadn't. All those moments, all those times he'd forgiven, made excuses, told himself it was temporary, that marriage had seasons. That winter passed if you were patient enough. But what if it wasn't winter? What if it was just Over? Had been over for years, and he'd been too scared to see it? Roger sat on the couch at 2 in the morning, guest room door closed, and silent above him. He was 67 years old. If he left, where would he go? He had no family. Parents dead, no siblings. Their friends were really Linda's friends from work. This house was his life's work. Everything he'd built. How could he leave it? But staying was dying, slowly, invisibly. One dismissed gesture at a time. 4 in the morning, Roger gave up on sleep, got dressed in the dark, took his keys, walked out to the truck. The engine fought the cold, then caught. He let it warm up, watching exhaust puff white into the darkness. The streets were empty, buried, nobody going anywhere. He sat there with the heater running, no destination in his head, just away, somewhere. Anywhere but the house he'd built that had become a tomb. The fuel gauge showed half a tank. Engine rumbled steady, reliable. Things Roger maintained always worked. But where do you go when you've got nowhere to go? Morning Cup Diner had lights on, Margie opening early, like always. He could see movement inside, warm and alive, while the rest of the town slept under snow. Roger thought about going in. But what would he say? How do you explain that your wife forged your signature and sold your house? That she dismissed you in public like garbage? That you've been sleeping on the couch in the home you built because the woman you've loved for 38 years can't stand to be in the same room? He kept the engine running, sat there as the sky started to lighten, gray on gray. The birds hadn't started yet. World was silent except for his truck's idle and the heater's fan. 5 o'clock. Still sitting. Fuel gauge dropping toward a quarter tank. Someone knocked on the window. Roger jerked, startled. Margie Walsh stood in her diner apron, breath fogging in the cold. No judgment in her face, just concern. She knocked again, gestured for him to roll down the window. Roger's hand moved to the button, hesitated. Once he rolled it down, once he talked to someone, it became real. All of it became something he couldn't take back. Margie waited, patient. Her eyes said she'd stand there all morning if she had to. Roger rolled down the window. Engine's been running 20 minutes, Margie said quietly. You planning something quiet, Roger? The question hung in the cold air between them. Honest and direct, no sugar on it. Roger opened his mouth, closed it. Couldn't find words that fit. Come inside, Margie said. I made soup last night, still hot. It wasn't a request. The morning cup was empty except for them. Pre-opening quiet, just the hiss of the coffee maker and the radiator clanking to life. Smelled like fryer oil and honest work. Margie poured coffee into a ceramic mug, the one Roger recognized from his father's workshop, one he'd made in high school. She'd kept it all these years. She set a thermos of soup in front of him. Didn't say anything, just waited. Roger wrapped his hands around the mug. The heat hurt, but it was real. First real thing he'd felt in days. I saw your truck at 4, Margie said finally. Been watching it since. Couldn't sleep. Engine runs that long. A person's either going somewhere or thinking about not going anywhere at all. She sat down across from him. Which one were you doing? Roger stared into his coffee. I don't know. That's an answer too. The words came then, like a dam breaking. He told her everything. The Christmas party, Linda's recoil. Don't touch me in front of my boss. The 3 people who'd heard it. Gerald's smirk. He told her about the forged documents. $340,000. The house he'd built board by board, sold without his knowledge. Linda's justification. You barely finished high school. He told her about the confrontation that changed nothing. The ghostly coexistence. Linda, laughing with Gerald behind locked doors, while Roger sat alone in the house he'd made with his own hands. Margie listened without interrupting. Her face stayed steady, but something in her eyes went hard when he got to the high school comment. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, you built half this town, Roger. People remember. It doesn't matter what people remember. I can't prove. You keep records? Every receipt, every permit, 40 years of them. Then you can prove plenty. She stood up, refilled his coffee. My nephew Danny's a paralegal, does financial fraud cases in Des Moines. I'll call him. Roger shook his head. I can't afford. You built my house for cost when Tom died. And Margie's voice was firm. Wouldn't take a penny more, even though I had insurance money. Said widows had enough to worry about. She pushed the soup closer. This isn't charity, Roger. This is paying back. She pulled out a napkin, wrote a phone number. Danny, tell him everything. Roger stared at the number. A lifeline maybe, or just another way to sink. You need somewhere to stay, Margie said. Apartment upstairs is empty. Has been since the Hendersons moved out. I can't leave the house. It's my life's. It's wood and nails. Margie's voice gentled. You built it, you can build another. But you can't build anything if you're not breathing right first. She set a key on the table next to the napkin, small and brass, worn smooth. No rush. Tonight, tomorrow, next week. Whenever you're ready. Roger picked up the key. It was warm from her pocket. Solid, real. For the first time in 3 days, something in his chest loosened just enough to let him breathe. Later that morning, Roger drove to the church. Not sure why. Just needed to be somewhere that wasn't the house. The parking lot was plowed. Pastor Jim lived in the rectory, kept things maintained. Roger sat in his truck for a few minutes, engine ticking as it cooled. The church door was unlocked. Always was during the day. Roger stepped inside, and the quiet wrapped around him like a blanket. Smelled like old wood and candle wax. He sat in the back pew. Hadn't been to service in months. Linda had stopped going 2 years ago, said she was too busy. Roger had kept coming for a while, then stopped too. Easier than going alone. The donation room door stood ajar. Wednesday morning, Linda volunteered sorting donations. Had for years. One of the things she did to look good in the community. Roger shouldn't have looked. Should have just sat in the pew and been still. But he saw the box. Cardboard, sitting on the sorting table. Linda's handwriting on the side. Old junk from dead people. Discard. Roger walked over, looked inside. His mother's ornament sat on top. Hand-carved wood, a little house with a peaked roof. His mother had made it the year before she died. Burned words into the base with a wood tool. Home is where you're respected. And she'd given it to Roger and Linda for their 10th anniversary. It had hung on their tree every Christmas since. Until it hadn't. Roger picked it up. Fit perfectly in his palm, smooth from his mother's hands. She'd spent weeks on it. Her arthritis had been bad that year, but she'd wanted to make something that would last. Linda had thrown it away, called it junk from dead people. Roger? Pastor Jim stood in the doorway. Quiet voice man, maybe 50. He'd done Roger's mother's funeral. Roger held up the ornament. Couldn't speak. Pastor Jim looked at the box, read Linda's label. His face went still. She dropped that off 2 weeks ago. I hadn't gotten to it yet. My mother made this. Roger's voice came out rough. I remember. She showed it to me once. Said home wasn't walls, it was respect. Pastor Jim's eyes were kind. I'll testify to that if you need me to. Roger closed his fingers around the ornament. The first thing he was taking back. The first thing he was claiming. I might need you too, Roger said. Roger drove back to the house. Linda's car was gone. Aaron's, probably. The blizzard had finally cleared. He sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. The ornament sat next to his coffee cup, solid and real. Started making a list. Like planning a job. Materials needed. Steps in order. Timeline, what to take. Clothes, tools, essentials only. Documents, all 40 years. Ornament, nothing else. When? Weather said another blizzard wave tomorrow night. Smaller one, but enough. Linda always slept through storms. Perfect cover. Where? Margie's apartment. Temporary but safe. After. Call Danny. Build the case like building a house. Foundation first. Roger checked the forecast on his phone. Snow starting tomorrow at 6 a.m. Heavy by noon. Perfect timing. He heard Linda's car in the driveway. Closed the notebook. Slid it under the couch cushion. Set the ornament in his jacket pocket. Linda came in with shopping bags. Expensive stores from the logos. She glanced at Roger, then away. Storm finally quit. Yeah. You'll be able to get back to work. Yeah. She went upstairs with her bags. Door closed. Lock clicked. Roger sat at the table and ran his hand over the wood grain. Perfect joints. Measured twice. Cut once. 40 years of his life. In this house. Time to build something new. In 48 hours, he'd be gone. 48 hours felt like 48 years. Roger went through the motions. Made coffee in the morning. Pretended to look at job estimates. Nodded when Linda said things about the weather clearing up. She didn't notice he was different. Didn't notice he was planning instead of just enduring. Day one, he packed a duffel bag. One at a time when Linda was on her Zoom calls. Work clothes. His father's photos from the workshop. The ornament wrapped careful in a towel. Hid the bag in the garage under a tarp. Linda came and went. Shopping, she said. Came back with more bags, more clothes Roger had never seen her wear. She was humming these days. Light and happy, like a weight had lifted. For her, maybe it had. She'd made her choice. Was just waiting for Roger to figure it out and leave on his own. He'd oblige. Just not the way she expected. Day 2, the forecast updated. Heavy snow starting 6 a.m. 12 to 18 inches. Roads would be bad by noon. Linda was thrilled. Another snow day. I'll finally catch up on those reports. Reports, right. That evening, Roger sorted through his documents in the garage while Linda was in the shower. 40 years of receipts, permits, contracts, everything organized by year in banker's boxes. Most men kept a shoebox if they kept anything at all. Roger had a filing system. He loaded 3 boxes into the truck bed, covered them with a tarp. Linda never looked in the garage. 5:30 a.m., Roger's alarm buzzed. Silent alarm on his phone. He'd been awake anyway. Snow was already coming down. Big flakes in the glow of the streetlight. Beautiful, if you weren't trying to erase yourself. Linda's room was dark. She'd been up late on a call. He'd heard her laughing through the floor until past midnight. She'd sleep until 9, at least. Always did after her late Gerald calls. Roger dressed in the dark. Work boots, heavy coat. Moved quiet through the house. First trip, the duffel bag from the garage. Set it in the passenger seat. Truck was already running, warming up. He'd started it at 5:20, let the engine idle low. Snow was accumulating fast. Good. Cover his tire tracks within the hour. Second trip, his table saw. The good one. The one his father had given him when Roger started his business. Heavy as sin, but he wasn't leaving it. Third trip, drill set, hand planes, the level that never lied. 7 o'clock. Linda's alarm would go off at 8. He had time, but not much. Roger stood in the kitchen, looked around one last time. The cabinets he'd built, the floor he'd laid, the archway he'd designed. 40 years of mornings in this room, coffee at this table, plans drawn on napkins. He took his house key off the ring, set it on the oak table, right in the center, no note. What would he say? Everything that needed saying he'd already said. She just hadn't listened. Upstairs, Linda's phone buzzed. Even from down here, he could hear it. Gerald's ringtone. She'd set a special one, some jazz piece that made her smile. 7:15. Her Zoom call was starting early. Roger heard her voice through the ceiling. Hey! Give me 1 second, I just woke up. Rustling sounds, water running. Then her voice again, warm and bright. Okay, I'm ready. What did you need to go over? Gerald's voice, too low to make out words. Linda laughed. Roger walked out the door, closed it soft behind him. The lock clicked, and it sounded final, loud as a gavel, in the quiet snow. He got in the truck, backed out of the driveway. The house disappeared in his rearview mirror, swallowed by white. Linda was still laughing. He could picture her, makeup on now, hair fixed, smiling at the screen, not noticing the truck was gone. Not noticing he was gone. Probably wouldn't notice for hours. The Morning Cup sat warm and bright on Main Street, only building with lights on this early in a storm. Roger parked in the alley, climbed the narrow stairs to the apartment. His key, Margie's key, fit smooth in the lock. The apartment was small. Single room, slanted ceiling, window looking over Main Street, bed in one corner, kitchenette in another, smelled like the diner below, fryer oil and coffee and honest work. Roger set the duffel bag on the bed, unpacked the ornament first, set it on the windowsill where morning light would catch it, sat down on the bed edge. The quiet was different here. Not the suffocating silence of the house, just peaceful, like he could breathe full for the first time in months. He was exhausted. Hadn't really slept in 5 days. His eyes burned. His shoulders ached from loading the truck. Margie knocked soft on the door. Brought coffee and eggs if you want them. Roger opened the door. Margie stood there with a tray, steam rising from the cup. She looked at his face and didn't ask questions. Eat first, she said. Unpack later. They sat at the little table by the window. Roger ate without tasting. Margie drank her coffee and watched the snow. Called Danny last night, she said finally. He's driving up this afternoon. Weather doesn't scare that boy. Storm's pretty bad. He wants to see your documents. She glanced at Roger. Said if you've got what I think you've got, he can help. Roger thought about the 40 years of receipts in his truck. Every permit, every contract, every payment, documented and filed. I've got it, he said. 2 o'clock, Danny Walsh knocked on the apartment door. Young guy, maybe 35, dress shirt and jeans, laptop bag over his shoulder. Had Margie's eyes, sharp and kind at the same time. Mr. Hensley, Danny shook his hand. Let's see what you've got. Roger brought up the document boxes from the truck, set them on the table. 40 years of his life in cardboard. Danny opened the first box, pulled out a receipt from 1984, then one from 1991, then 2003. Flipped through permits organized by year and project. Every single one, documented, dated, filed proper. He looked up at Roger. You kept everything. I'm a carpenter. You measure everything. Danny actually smiled. Most people have a shoebox if they're lucky. You have a legal case. He pulled out his laptop. Show me the forged documents. Roger handed over the loan papers, his fake signature. The bank warning letters Linda had crumpled up. Danny's fingers flew over the keyboard. Searching something. His face went serious. Pemberton Riverside Development? That's what the loan was for? That's what it says. Mr. Hensley, there is no Pemberton Riverside Development. Danny turned the laptop around. No permits filed. No land purchased. No project. Roger stared at the screen. Then where's the money? That, Danny said, is a very good question. And one we're going to answer. He pulled out a notepad. This isn't just about your house anymore. This is fraud. Major fraud. Gerald Pemberton's been running a scheme. And your wife got caught in it. She forged my signature. Well, she did, but I'm betting she did it because Gerald told her to. Probably said it was routine, or that you'd agreed, or that it didn't matter. Danny's eyes were sharp now, focused. She's guilty, yeah, but she's also a victim. He's been manipulating her. Roger thought about Linda's laugh through the locked door, her expensive clothes, the way she looked at Gerald. Doesn't feel like she's a victim, Roger said quietly. Understanding isn't the same as forgiving. Danny closed his laptop. But it gives us leverage. She testifies against Gerald. She might avoid prosecution. He looked at Roger direct. You want justice, or you want revenge? Roger thought about that. Revenge would feel good for a minute. Justice would last. Justice, he said. Good answer. Danny stood up. I'll start building the case. We'll need witnesses, people who saw the pattern of behavior, the party humiliation, the separate tables at the diner. Aunt Margie mentioned that. Anyone else? Roger thought. Pastor Jim. He saw her throw away my mother's ornament. Perfect. Anyone from the party? Mrs. Chen, the bartender, Gerald's assistant maybe. Danny wrote it all down. We're going to make this right, Mr. Hensley. Your records just gave us everything we need. After Danny left, Roger lay down on the bed. Sun was already setting. Winter days were short. The ornament caught the last light from the window. For the first time in 5 days, Roger slept, dreamless and deep. Roger woke to the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up through the floorboards. Disoriented for a second, this wasn't his couch, wasn't his house. Then he remembered. He'd left. The ornament caught morning light on the windowsill, real and solid. He got dressed and went downstairs. The diner was just opening, 5:30, same as always. Margie looked up from the grill. Coffee's fresh. Sit anywhere. Roger took the corner booth. Felt strange being on this side of things. He'd eaten here for 30 years, but always rushed. Grabbing something between jobs. Never just sitting. Margie brought him eggs and toast. Set them down without asking. Knew what he liked. Danny called this morning. She said, well, wants to meet again. Said he found something. Danny arrived at 7 with his laptop and 3 folders. Spread them across the diner table. Early crowd was starting to filter in. Regulars who nodded at Roger like always, like nothing had changed. Maybe for them, nothing had. Okay, Danny said. Gerald Pemberton's been busy. He opened the first folder. Found 4 other contractors whose licenses he used as loan guarantees. All fake development projects, all following the same pattern. Roger stared at the names. 2 he knew personally. Good men, honest workers. They don't know yet, Danny continued. Banks haven't caught up, but they will. He pulled out bank statements. Gerald's been funneling money into personal accounts, cars, trips, real estate. He paused. Including a condo in Florida. Listed as corporate property, but the lease has Linda's name on it. That landed hard. Roger set down his coffee cup careful like it might shatter. Did she know? About the condo? Hard to say. About the fraud? Danny shrugged. Maybe yes, maybe no. But she knew enough to forge your signature. That makes her complicit. Margie refilled Roger's coffee. Her hand was steady, but her jaw was tight. Danny opened the second folder. Good news is the bank manager flagged your loan immediately. Woman named Helen Kowalski. She kept copies of everything. Corporate overrode her concerns, but she documented it all. He smiled. She's willing to testify. Why would she do that? Said something felt wrong from the start. Gerald went around her, straight to regional office. She doesn't like being bypassed. Danny looked at his notes. Plus, she's been with the bank 28 years. Her reputation matters. Roger thought about that. People protecting their work, their integrity. He understood that. Margie's willing to testify too, Danny said. About the pattern of behavior. The separate tables. The public dismissal. All of it. Margie nodded. Been watching it for months. Someone needs to say it out loud. Mrs. Chen already agreed, Danny continued. Pastor Jim too. He's documenting the ornament incident. He closed the folders. Roger, we've got a case. Strong one. Criminal fraud investigation, civil asset protection, the whole thing. When? Courthouse hearing January 15th. Judge will review evidence, decide on protective orders and criminal referral. Danny met his eyes. This is going to be public. Small town. Everyone will know. Roger thought about that. Linda's humiliation at being exposed. Gerald's reputation destroyed. The whole town watching. Part of him felt bad about it. Small part. The rest of him remembered standing at that Christmas party with his hand frozen in the air. Let them know, Roger said. Week went by. Roger fell into a rhythm. 5 a.m. coffee at Margie's. Morning regulars started including him in their conversations. Weather, high school basketball, who was fixing whose roof, like he'd always been there. One morning, a young guy approached his booth. Late 20s, work clothes, nervous. Mr. Hensley, I'm Tyler, work for Sanderson Construction. Roger recognized the name. Small outfit, decent work. I've got a crown molding job. First time doing corners solo. Tyler shifted his weight. Sanderson said ask you. Said if anyone knows how to make joints fit perfect, it's you. Something in Roger's chest loosened. Someone wanted his knowledge, his skill. Bring your miter saw tomorrow morning, Roger said. I'll show you. Tyler's face lit up. Really? Thank you, Mr. Hensley. Just Roger. Next morning, Tyler showed up with his saw and a mess of cut pieces that didn't fit right. Roger took him to the diner parking lot, empty this early, and set up a demonstration. Feel the angle, Roger said, guiding Tyler's hands. Your fingers know when it's right before your eyes do. Tyler tried again. The piece fit better. Not perfect, but closer. That's it. Now again. They worked for an hour. Tyler's cuts got cleaner each time. When he finally made a joint that fit tight and true, his whole face changed. That's beautiful, Tyler breathed. You make it look so easy. 40 years of practice. Roger cleaned sawdust off the saw. But you've got good hands. You'll get there. Tyler packed up his tools like they were precious. Thank you, really. Sanderson's had me on grunt work for 2 years. This is the first time someone treated me like I could actually build something. After Tyler left, Margie brought Roger fresh coffee. That was good, she said. Teaching him. Roger hadn't realized how good it would feel to pass something forward, to matter in a way that lasted beyond a single job. His phone rang. Danny. Courthouse dates confirmed. January 15th, 9 a.m., Judge Margaret Kowalski presiding. Danny paused. Gerald hired Marcus Brennan, big shot lawyer from Des Moines, known for intimidating small-town witnesses. Should I be worried? No. Danny's voice was confident. We've got truth and 40 years of documentation. He's got arrogance and an embezzlement scheme. I like our odds. Roger hung up, looked out at the street. January 15th was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks until he faced Linda and Gerald in court. 3 weeks until the whole town knew what they'd done. He touched the ornament in his pocket, carried it everywhere now. Reminder of what was worth fighting for. Not the house, not the money, the right to be respected in the life you built. Week before the hearing, Danny came back with a witness list and a game plan. They sat in the diner apartment going over testimony. Margie first, she'd established the pattern. 6 months of watching Linda dismiss Roger, roll her eyes, treat him like he was invisible. Small cruelties that added up. Keep it factual, Danny coached. Dates if you remember them. Specific incidents. No speculation about why she did it. Margie nodded. I can do that. Mrs. Chin would testify about the Christmas party. The exact words Linda used. Gerald's smirk. The 3 witnesses who heard it clear. Helen from the bank would present the documents. The flagged loan. Her warnings that got overridden. The paper trail of Gerald's other fraudulent loans. Pastor Jim would testify about the ornament. Linda's handwriting on the box. Old junk from dead people. And Roger would go last. Just the facts. Did you authorize this loan? No. Is that your signature? No. Did you know about this development project? No. Let the documents speak, Danny said. You just verify them. Roger practiced his answers. Short, direct, no embellishment. They'll try to make you look stupid, Danny warned. Brennan's known for that. He'll bring up the high school thing, try to paint you as too simple to understand business. I know what I know, Roger said. Exactly. Stick with that. Danny closed his folder. One more thing. Gerald and Linda will show up confident. Expensive clothes, expensive lawyer. They think small towns are easy to fool. Are they? Danny smiled. We're about to find out. January 15th arrived cold and clear. Snow melting off the roofs, icicles dripping in the morning sun. Roger put on his good shirt, the same blue one from the Christmas party. Seemed right somehow. Full circle. Margie drove them to the courthouse. Danny was already there, setting up files in the courtroom. The courthouse was old, built in 1902, limestone and wood. Roger had worked on it over the years, fixed the front steps after the '08 ice storm, repaired the railing on the second floor, replaced rotten boards in the witness stand. His work was everywhere in this town. Invisible, unless you knew where to look. They entered the courtroom. Wooden benches worn smooth by 100 years of worried hands. The old radiator clanked and hissed in the corner. Roger had fixed that 15 years ago when it was leaking. Judge's bench sat high, dark wood polished to a shine. Danny spread documents across their table. Organized, methodical, everything in its place. 8:40, Roger sat down. Looked at the empty defense table. 8:50, still empty. 9 o'clock. The courtroom door opened. Gerald Pemberton walked in like he owned the place. Expensive black overcoat, tailored suit underneath, hair perfect, smile confident. Linda followed in a matching black coat, newer than Gerald's. Probably bought for this. Her face was made up careful, but Roger could see tension around her eyes. Marcus Brennan came last. Big city lawyer, 50s, gray suit that probably cost more than Roger's truck. He barely glanced at Danny, didn't acknowledge Roger at all. They sat down. Gerald whispered something to Linda. She nodded, didn't look toward Roger's table. Gerald did, though. Looked right at Roger with that same smirk from the Christmas party. Like this was all a formality, an inconvenience that would blow over. 9:15. The bailiff stood. All rise. The Honorable Judge Margaret Kowalski presiding. Everyone stood. The judge entered. Woman, mid-60s, steel gray hair pulled back. Sharp eyes behind reading glasses. She carried herself like someone who'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. Roger didn't recognize her. She sat, reviewed the case file, looked up at the room. Her eyes passed over Brennan and Gerald without interest. Paused on Linda for a moment, then landed on Roger. Something flickered in her expression. Not quite a smile, more like recognition. Hensley, she said. It's been a while. Roger's mind raced. He didn't know this woman. Couldn't place her. The judge turned to the lawyers. Gentlemen, let's proceed. I have limited patience for financial fraud, and my calendar's full. Brennan stood. Your Honor, if I may, you may present your opening statement, Mr. Brennan. Briefly. And Brennan launched into it. Lots of fancy words. Called it an unfortunate marital misunderstanding between two people with different financial sophistications. Said his clients made a business decision in good faith. That Mr. Hensley was informed but perhaps didn't understand the complexities. Small towns, Brennan said with a condescending smile, often misunderstand sophisticated financial arrangements. Judge Kowalski's eyebrow went up. Just a fraction. Is that so? Yes, Your Honor. My clients are successful business people who... Mr. Brennan. The judge's voice was cool. I grew up in a town smaller than this one. I understand sophisticated arrangements just fine. Please stick to facts. Brennan's smile faltered. Of course, Your Honor. Danny stood for his opening. No flowery language. Just plain truth. Forged signature, fraudulent loan, stolen equity. He held up the side-by-side signatures, Roger's real one and Linda's forgery. Mr. Hensley keeps records. 40 years of them. Will prove this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was systematic fraud. He sat down. The documents on his table said more than any speech could. Brennan smirked at the stacks of paper. Your Honor, lots of paper doesn't prove... Mr. Brennan, Judge Kowalski cut him off. Save your arguments for testimony. She looked at Danny. Mr. Walsh, call your first witness. Danny stood. The plaintiff calls Margie Walsh. Margie walked to the witness stand. Steady, calm. She got sworn in, sat down. Gerald leaned toward Linda, whispered, Who's that? Linda shook her head. She didn't know, but Roger knew, and Danny knew, and in about 5 minutes, the whole courtroom would know. Margie was about to say out loud what everyone had seen, but nobody had named, and there was no taking it back. Danny approached the witness stand. Ms. Walsh, how long have you known Roger Hensley? 32 years, since my husband Tom died in a grain elevator accident. And what did Mr. Hensley do after your husband passed? Built my house for cost. Wouldn't take a penny more, even though I had insurance money. Said widows had enough to worry about. Miss Roger saw the judge write something down. In recent months, what did you observe about the Hensley's marriage? Margie didn't hesitate. 6 months ago, Linda stopped sitting with Roger at breakfast. She'd take a table on the other side of the diner. When he'd tell stories to other customers, she'd roll her eyes. Once I saw her throw his coffee cup away. While he was still drinking from it, bought it back, poured him a fresh one. Did you notice anything else? She wore expensive clothes. New purse, new coat, new everything. But when Roger tried to pay for breakfast, she'd say money was tight. Margie's voice stayed level, matter of fact. Her phone calls changed too. She'd talk warm and sweet to someone. Then Roger would walk in and her whole voice would go cold. Danny nodded. Did you witness the Christmas party incident? No, but Mrs. Chen told me about it the next morning. Linda told Roger not to touch her in front of her boss. Said it was embarrassing. Mrs. Chen heard it clear. In your opinion, was the Christmas party the first time Linda dismissed Roger publicly? No. Margie looked at Linda. It was just the first time she said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Linda's face went pale. She stared at the table. Brennan stood for cross-examination, tried his condescending smile. Ms. Walsh, you run a diner. Isn't gossip part of your business? I run an honest business. I observe. There's a difference. You're clearly close with Mr. Hensley. Naturally biased. Roger built my house when I had nothing. You're right. I'm biased toward decent people. Margie's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. But I know what I saw, and I saw 6 months of cruelty. Brennan's smile died. No further questions. Margie stepped down, squeezed Roger's shoulder as she passed. One down. Danny called Helen Kowalski next. She walked to the stand with a folder thick as a phone book. Ms. Kowalski, you're the manager at First National Bank. 28 years. And you flagged the loan for Roger Hensley's property? Immediately. Helen opened her folder. The signature didn't match Mr. Hensley's on file. I documented my concerns and sent them to corporate. They overrode me. Said Mr. Pemberton had connections at the regional office. But you kept copies. I keep copies of everything. Helen pulled out documents. This loan was one of 6 that Mr. Pemberton processed through regional, all using contractors' licenses as guarantees, all for the same project, Pemberton Riverside Development. Danny handed her another paper. What is this? County records. There is no Pemberton Riverside Development, no permits filed, no land purchased. The project doesn't exist. A murmur went through the courtroom. Gerald's face stayed smooth, but his jaw tightened. Where did the money go? Helen pulled out bank statements. Into Mr. Pemberton's personal accounts. $370,000 over 6 months. Luxury car purchases, international travel, and a condo in Florida. Who's listed on the Florida property? Helen glanced at Linda. Gerald Pemberton as corporate owner, Linda Hensley on the lease. Linda's hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Brennan objected. Your Honor, this is beyond the scope. Overruled. Judge Kowalski leaned forward. It's directly relevant to motive and pattern of fraud. Continue, Mr. Walsh. Danny presented Rogers 40 years of records. Every receipt, every permit, every payment, documented and organized. He spread them across the evidence table. Physical presence impossible to ignore. Mrs. Hensley's accounting versus Mr. Pemberton's, Danny said simply. One man documented every nail. The other stole hundreds of thousands with fake projects. The contrast was devastating. Roger's meticulous honesty next to Gerald's sophisticated theft. Helen was excused. Gerald whispered urgently to Brennan. Whatever confidence he'd walked in with was cracking. The plaintiff calls Roger Hensley. Roger stood, walked to the witness stand, got sworn in. His hands were steady. Danny's questions were simple, direct. Mr. Hensley, did you authorize the loan against your property? No. Is that your signature on the loan documents? No, ma'am. It's close, but it's not mine. Did you know about Pemberton Riverside Development? No, I know every development in this county. That project doesn't exist. Danny sat down. Your witness, Mr. Brennan? Brennan stood. Time for the class attack Danny had warned about. Mr. Hensley, you didn't finish high school, correct? 10th grade. Started my apprenticeship at 16. So complex financial matters might be difficult for you to understand. I understand when someone's stealing from me. But surely Mr. Pemberton, with his MBA and business experience, I built half this town. Roger's voice stayed calm, level. I know the difference between building something real and building something fake. Brennan tried again. Isn't it possible you simply didn't understand? Judge Kowalski interrupted. Mr. Brennan, where exactly are you going with this? Establishing financial sophistication, Your Honor. Mr. Hensley's financial sophistication is demonstrated by 40 years of perfect records. The judge looked at Roger. Her expression changed, softened just slightly. Miss Hensley, you built my daughter's wheelchair ramp 15 years ago. The courtroom went silent. Roger's mind finally clicked. The Kowalski girl, Sarah, cerebral palsy. He'd built that ramp in a weekend, wouldn't take payment. I remember, Roger said quietly. You refused payment, came back twice to adjust it as she grew. Judge Kowalski's voice was steady, but something moved behind her eyes. I never forgot that kindness. She turned to Brendan. Mr. Hensley's character is not in question here. Mr. Pemberton's is. Gerald's face drained white. Brennan looked like he'd swallowed glass. I'm recusing myself from any sentencing proceedings regarding Mr. Pemberton to avoid conflict of interest. The judge's voice went hard as stone. But I'm ordering an immediate criminal fraud investigation. And I'm issuing a protective order on Mr. Hensley's assets, effective immediately. She looked at Gerald. Mr. Pemberton, you'll remain available for the prosecutor's office. Do you understand? Gerald couldn't speak, just nodded. The gavel came down, sharp and final. Brennan gathered his papers fast. Gerald stood on shaking legs. They headed for the door like the room was on fire. Linda stayed in her seat, crying now, makeup running. She looked at Roger as he stood to leave. Roger. Her voice broke. Please, can we talk? Roger stopped. Turned. She stood up, walked toward him, reached for his arm, the same gesture she'd recoiled from at the Christmas party. Her touch desperate now, pleading. I'm sorry, I was trapped. Gerald said if I didn't sign, he'd... She was sobbing. We can fix this. We can start over. Everything we built. Roger looked at her hand on his arm. Didn't pull away cruel. Didn't shake her off. He simply stepped back, creating distance, clean and final. You didn't build anything, Linda. I did. His voice was quiet, sad even, but firm, and you sold it without asking. Where will you go? What will you do? Roger didn't answer, walked past her. Through the courtroom doors, into January sunlight, Margie and Danny were waiting outside. You okay? Margie asked. Roger took a breath. Cold air, clean and sharp. Yeah, I am. Behind them, through the courthouse windows, Linda stood alone in the empty courtroom, still reaching for something that was already done. 6 weeks later, spring started showing itself. Not full bloom yet, still March, still cold at night, but the cherry tree outside Roger's apartment window had buds on it. The one he'd planted 20 years ago for their anniversary. It was blooming without him. Funny how things grew whether you were there to watch or not. Roger's mornings had a rhythm now. 5 a.m., down to the diner, coffee in his father's mug, eggs and toast. The morning regulars included him in their talk like he'd always been there. Weather, high school basketball making a playoff run, Tom Henderson's new grandbaby. Nobody asked about Linda. Small-town courtesy. They all knew courthouse proceedings were public and news traveled fast. But they let Roger carry it quiet. Tyler showed up most mornings now. Brought his tools, asked questions, listened to answers. Learning not just technique, but the why behind it. Why you measure twice, why grain direction matters, why patience builds better than speed. This morning, Tyler had finally mastered the crown molding corner. Brought in a sample piece. Joint so tight you couldn't slip paper through it. Look at that, Tyler said, proud as a new father. Roger examined it, ran his finger along the seam. Perfect. That's good work. Feels different when it's right. Like you said, your hands know. They do. As Roger handed it back. Now you've got to do it 100 more times until your hands don't have to think about it. Tyler grinned. Sanderson's giving me the Weber house trim job. Says I'm ready. Something warm moved in Roger's chest. Not his work continuing. Tyler's work beginning. Different thing entirely. Margie refilled their coffee. You two gonna start charging rent for that corner booth? Probably should, Roger said. Been conducting classes here. Good. Place needs some purpose beyond bacon and gossip. She smiled. Though the bacon's pretty good. Danny called that afternoon with updates. Gerald was facing 3 felony fraud charges. Federal prosecutors had gotten involved. The scheme was bigger than anyone thought. 12 contractors across 3 counties. Over $1 million in fraudulent loans. Trial was set for June. Gerald's expensive lawyer had filed for a plea deal. Probably take it. Prison time was likely. Linda had signed a quitclaim deed on the house to avoid prosecution, moved to Des Moines. Her sister's place. Danny heard. The house would sell, proceeds to Roger. Enough to buy something smaller, something his. She called my office twice, Danny said, asking if you'd talk to her. What did you tell her? That you'd reach out if you wanted to? You want to? Roger thought about it, about 38 years. About the woman who'd laughed in an empty living room while they danced on plywood. About the woman who'd thrown his mother's ornament in a donation box. 2 different people. Or maybe the same person at different times. Either way, not his problem anymore. No, Roger said. I don't think I do. Fair enough, Danny paused. One more thing. Judge Kowalski asked me to pass along a message. Sarah, her daughter, is getting married in May. She wanted you to know the ramp you built is still perfect. Never needed a single repair. Roger's throat got tight. That's good. Tell her congratulations. Wait. After Danny hung up, Roger sat in his apartment looking out at Main Street. The afternoon crowd at the diner. People coming and going. Life moving forward like it always did. His phone stayed silent. Linda didn't call. Probably better that way. Thursday morning, a woman knocked on the diner door before opening. Older, maybe 70. Roger recognized her from church. Mr. Hensley, I'm Dorothy Henderson. We met at the Christmas bazaar a few years back. Mrs. Henderson? I remember. My porch is sagging something awful. Steps got a crack in it. I'm worried about falling. She twisted her hands. I know you're retired, but everyone says if anyone can fix it proper, it's you. Roger looked at Tyler across the booth. You free this afternoon? Tyler's eyes went wide. You want me to come? Best way to learn is doing. Mrs. Henderson's house was 2 blocks off Main. Small place, probably built in the 50s. The porch was indeed sagging. Support posts rotted through, foundation settled wrong. Roger walked around it twice. Looked underneath, checked the joists. Tyler watched, learning to see what Roger saw. Posts are done, Roger said. Foundation needs shimming. 2 joists cracked clean through. Can you fix it? Mrs. Henderson asked from the doorway. Roger looked at Tyler. Can we fix it? Tyler swallowed. Yeah, we can. And they spent the afternoon on it. Roger directing, Tyler doing most of the work. replacing posts, leveling the foundation, sistering new joists to the cracked ones. Roger's hands knew what to do without thinking. 40 years of muscle memory. But letting Tyler do the work, that took different muscles. Patience, trust, knowing when to guide and when to let someone figure it out themselves. By 4 o'clock, the porch was solid. Tyler tested it, walked the length, no creaking, jumped a little, nothing moved. "How do you know it's fixed?" Tyler asked. "When it holds weight without complaining." Roger ran his hand along the rail. His fingers caught a spot, rough edge where Tyler had cut. "Sand that smooth. You want someone running their hand along this in 20 years and not catching a splinter?" Tyler nodded, got the sandpaper from the truck, fixed it right. Mrs. Henderson brought them lemonade. "What do I owe you?" Roger looked at Tyler. "What's fair for the work?" Tyler calculated materials and labor, named a price that was honest but not gouging. "That's fair," Roger said. Mrs. Henderson paid in cash, shook both their hands. "Thank you, both of you." Walking back to the truck, Tyler was quiet. Then, "That felt good, building something that'll last." "That's the point," Roger said. "Not just making money, making something worth making." The sun was warm on their shoulders. Birds were loud after the long winter silence. Cherry blossoms, not from his tree, but someone's, drifted past on the breeze. Tyler loaded the tools. Roger stood by the truck, looking at Mrs. Henderson's porch. Solid now, safe. Would hold for another 20 years if she maintained it. He ran his hand along the truck bed rail. Felt for imperfections, out of habit. Found one, small rough spot, nothing serious, just needed attention. "It needs work," Roger said quietly. "I can fix it." Tyler looked over. "The truck?" Roger smiled. "Everything, all of it, I always could." They climbed in, drove back toward Main Street. The diner lights were coming on as evening settled in. Margie would have coffee ready. The regulars would be starting to gather for supper. Home wasn't the house he'd built on Oak Ridge Road. Home was this. Being seen, being valued, being trusted with someone's learning, being respected for what he actually built, not what someone tried to take. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. How long does it take to rebuild after everything falls apart? Roger didn't have an answer for that. Not a neat one, anyway. 6 weeks since he'd left. 6 weeks since the courthouse. Spring was coming, but it wasn't here yet. Things took the time they took. Some mornings he woke up and forgot where he was, reached for the familiar weight of 40 years, found only the small apartment and an honest coffee smell drifting up through the floorboards. Those mornings were hard. Other mornings he woke up and breathed easy for the first time in months. Those mornings were harder to explain. He'd learned some things, though. Hard-won things, the kind you don't learn from books or advice. Home isn't walls and crown molding, isn't the boards you cut or the nails you drove. Home is being seen for what you actually are, being valued for what you actually built. It's respect given because respect was offered first. Linda had taught him what he wouldn't accept anymore. That was worth something, even if it hurt. Margie and Danny and Tyler. They taught him what he deserved. That was worth more. Some marriages die in silence. Not because nobody's talking, but because nobody's listening. Roger had spent years speaking a language Linda had stopped understanding. Or maybe she'd never understood it. Either way, you can't build a life with someone who's tearing down your foundation while you're still standing on it. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just documentation and truth, presented plainly to someone who's willing to see it. Judge Kowalski had seen it. The whole courtroom had seen it. That was enough. Revenge would have felt good for a minute. Justice felt good every morning after. Roger thought about legacy sometimes. Used to think it was the houses he'd built, the porches and decks and wheelchair ramps, all the wood and nails that would outlast him. But watching Tyler learn, really learn, not just mechanics but the why behind it, Roger understood different now. Legacy wasn't what you left behind. It was what you passed forward. Skills and patience and the knowledge that work done right mattered more than work done fast. The ornament sat on his windowsill. Home is where you're respected, as his mother had known what she was burning into that wood. It just took Roger 40 years and a forged signature to understand it. Friday evening, Roger stood on Mrs. Henderson's porch one more time. Wanted to check his work in different light, make sure it settled proper. The porch was solid, silent under his weight. Tyler had sanded that rough edge smooth. You could run your hand along it all day and never catch. Cherry blossoms drifted past from someone's tree down the block. The air smelled like thaw and possibility. Spring coming whether you were ready or not. Roger ran his calloused hand along the porch rail one more time. Felt for imperfections his eyes might miss. Found none. Just smooth wood and tight joints. Work that would last. He looked out at the street. The diner was lit up warm against the settling dark. Coffee waiting. Tomorrow morning, Tyler would show up with questions. The day after, another porch or deck or repair job that needed doing right. The work was honest. The hands were steady. The coffee tasted right again. Roger Hensley had built a lot of things in 67 years. Houses and porches and a marriage that didn't last. But he was still building, still teaching, still here. Some things you can fix, some things you can't. The trick is knowing which is which and having the courage to walk away from what's rotted through. Then you pick up your tools and build something new, something true, something that respects the hands that made it. The sun set red and gold over Main Street. Roger walked back toward the diner, toward coffee and light, and people who saw him clear. Home. Finally home.